like to welcome you all to the expert panel discussion on strategies and platforms for conducting remote research. This is sponsored by UCSF-CFAR's Substance Use Program of Research, otherwise known as SUPR, and the 232 Next Generation Neuroscientists in the HIV Epidemic. A little bit more information about SUPR. It is a program that aims to strengthen research at the intersection of HIV and substance use by supporting study design, intervention, mentorship, and collaboration. And it's led by Dean Dawson Rose and Dr. Santos. The UCSF School of Nursing is next generation of neuroscientists, and the HIV epidemic program is a NIH-funded training program that prepares pre-doctoral and postdoctoral nurse scholars to become leaders in HIV research. So thank you all for being here in Zoom, and I will pass next to my colleague, Jacqueline Crowe, to introduce our first panelist.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline Crowe. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a T32 PhD student. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Jordana Hemberg, MPH. Jordana is a research public health journalist at the Center for Policy and Implementation at RTI International, an independent scientific research institution dedicated to improving the health tradition. With nearly 20 years of experience, she serves as project director on NIH-funded research, working with minoritized populations in community-based settings. Research studies have focused on polysubstance use, overdose risk, and health disparities among women involved in the criminal legal system. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. I shared my slides over Zoom. Should I come off mute or anything?
No, there are microphones in the ceiling. So
great. Well, thank you for having me. I am going to talk a little bit about a study that we completed in 2024, and we're actually building off of right now. Okay, so the study that I'm going to share the context of the ecological momentary assessment is the POD study. It stands for Polysubstance Use Overdose Study. It took place from 2020 to 2024. It was funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and Jennifer Lorbeck served as guide. The thoughts behind this study came from polysubstance use is really driving this fourth crisis, this fourth wave of the fourth wave of the overdose crisis. And among people who use drugs, polysubstance use is pretty much the norm. People use multiple substances, as we all probably do. However, polysubstance use is not measured in any standardized way in the literature. Some people look at the past 30 days, the past 6 months, past year even, and it's all based on recall and retrospective data. So I'm hoping to get through all this briefly and share with you how we made it happen. I will admit that when we wrote this proposal, I was a little bit terrified of it getting funded because I did not know how the study was going to actually work, but it did. And today we're actually in the middle of a pilot that is, we're building off of what we found here. So I'm going to begin with, and I've talked about this before, but paramount to making this work successful is having a positive community presence. All of the work that we do, community-based and community-engaged research, has been located in downtown Oakland. We lease office space to create a field site so that the participants can come in there, feel comfortable. There's air conditioning. I know it seems like a small thing, but there's no restrooms downtown. So we lease the restroom. We've got snacks and harm reduction supplies and hygiene supplies and just things to make people feel comfortable. including hiring staff that treat everybody with dignity and the owed respect that everyone deserves. So there's really no shortcut to doing that. It's work, but it pays off. One, you get to meet some really wonderful people, but also you sort of build a reputation in the community. And a lot of this work, we wouldn't have been able to recruit enough participants if the word didn't spread like within the community by word of mouth. So this little flow chart of how the study runs and including the schedule of the visit. So the pod study took place over the course of a month. There were 5 study visits. That's this table on the right. And I included the incentives because I also very strongly believe that paying folks for every single thing that they do when they come in to see us is important. So we have it broken down like that. For recruitment, we recruited from harm reduction programs, flyers, and like I said, most people came through word of mouth. We're also very fortunate, partially because of COVID, that doesn't get said much, but we were able, myself and some other staff, to volunteer at a local syringe exchange during our work hours, but a couple hours every Friday before the study got going. So we got our faces known in the community, and we met other folks out there, and we're still doing it. So it's also a way to maintain contact. It's fun. So folks would come in for the enrollment visit after a verbal screening. We'd go through the informed consent process, of course. We had a point of care urinalysis to confirm their eligibility, baseline interview, and then this metric wire training. That's the EMA portion. So the EMA was collected every day, 3 times a day for the 28 weeks, or the 28 days. And we asked folks to come in each week to check in. And that way we could upload the data, and also served as like these frequent points of contact, help build rapport, and also a routine that just seemed to work for folks. And then upon study completion, there was a brief exit interview that I'll share some results from, and then we paid folks $30 for returning the phone that we provided to do the EMA. So although the platform that we chose, MetricWire, it's just an app and it can be downloaded on any device, we thought that providing the device to it would be better for several reasons, but mostly being the person on site that was going to be dealing with technical issues, if I could sort of control the phones a little bit, you know, I wouldn't know how to fix somebody else's phone, and I wouldn't want to invade their privacy like that either. So we purchased these refurbished older model iPhones, FE 2nd generation, and to reduce the street value of the phone, as well as make participating in the study more appealing, we had that bonus for returning it. The phones did not have a data plan, but they could connect Wi-Fi, and there was no SIM card. In an ideal world, I'd love to get phones for folks with a data plan, and everybody can keep them after the study, but the data plan would have been cost prohibitive, even if we were going to go that way. One of the great things about the ecological momentary assessment is people serve as their own data collectors, and it's happening in real time, in real life. So this all took place offline, which was one of the primary reasons we went with MetricWire, the platform that we chose to deliver the EMA. It had great functionality offline. Again, this was 2020, so I know more platforms are available now that can do a lot of these things, but we did have a very positive experience with MetricWire. When you pay for the license, you sign a data protection agreement. So when you get any technical support from the MetricWire folks, they only have access to the minimal amount of information or data necessary to help resolve your issue. It complies with all the security, all the necessary security features. I looked it up. We didn't use this, but it is also capable of capturing the informed consent, be involved in that. And there's also passive sensor data it'll collect, like for geofencing. This being offline and having the surveys delivered on a schedule is a fixed interval EMA, but there's other ways to do it where it can be sort of place-based. So somebody is, at a certain corner, then the survey would be triggered to be sent to them, or sort of activity-based. So if they engage in something, they know to like pop into the app and answer some questions. MetricWire also had great data security. Once you completed a survey on the device, it really just disappeared into the ether. It was encrypted and stored locally on the phone. It was impossible to, bless you, it was impossible to access it. So even if somebody wanted to look at a previous survey to see their own responses, that wasn't an option unless, they asked me when they came in to upload the data. And I couldn't access it either. And the data are encrypted during transmission end to end. So adherence, this was the part that I was really worried about, and I didn't know if we could make it. Actually, didn't know if we were going to get anybody who wanted to do it, but surprisingly, we got 122 people in about 15 months. And as you can see from the adherence, just like you would expect, it is all over the place, but nearly half of the participants completed more than 75% of the surveys. And overall, 65% of all of the surveys were completed. We only had 7 participants who did not provide any data. They did participate in the baseline and exit interview, but the important part, the EMA data, we didn't get. And I think that is the gist of the adherence. Answer more questions about how that works. So these are some of the results from the exit interview, and I wanted to share these to show that people seem to have a positive experience in the study and found it rather acceptable. One of the questions that I did not put up here, but it's sort of covered in the felt comfortable carrying the study phone. So we asked people how they would feel about carrying 2 cell phones, or maybe more, because most people have a phone. And it was not a problem. In fact, people really liked it. They liked it being separate. More than one person referred to the study phone as their work phone. And then the name of this presentation comes from, there was one participant who, when they were closing out at the end of the study and had to return their phone, they were really disappointed, and they said they were really going to miss it because it was like having a friend in their pocket. And this wasn't an intervention. It was just shooting surveys, morning, afternoon, evening, asking, what did you use today? How are you feeling? Who have you been with? So it was really great to find that people found it so interesting and acceptable to be part of, which is why we decided to build on it for what we are working on now. So what worked and lessons learned, we kind of know this from everything though, but we have to design participation for real life and not for what we would ideally like to happen. It's not a lab. And with EMA, we are purposely trying to get people to report from their natural environment in the middle of what they would normally be doing. We also try to reduce burden wherever possible. We don't ask any additional questions that we're not going to use. We try to avoid really triggering scales, especially, if we're not going to use them, we're not going to ask questions about trauma experiences. You know, we're really just looking at the outcomes and maybe some contextual data that we need to build off of. So part of, I think, why I'm here is about half of the sample that we worked with, and actually in all of the studies that we do help with, about half the folks are at any time experiencing homelessness. So we do as much as we can to help support their involvement as long as they want to participate. One of the things that worked well for this is we made these charging banks, and I would keep them charged. Well, when somebody enrolled and got their device, they would leave with a charging bank in the phone. And then when they'd come in for their check-ins, they could always swap out like their dead charging bank for a new one that like I would have ready for them. You know, unfortunately, lots of folks were also sleeping in their cars, so we had chargers that were compatible with that. We also provided money for transportation. Like even if somebody rode their bike, you know, I made sure to give them money for parking. So those kind of things help because I think people appreciate that you appreciate how much work it takes for them to come in. And then aside from that, we also had to remember to remain pretty flexible within our schedule. So people knew when the days we would be at the field site and the hours within which we would be there. And although we'd schedule appointments, again, life is chaotic and can't always show up on time, but they knew they were always welcome to show up when they could. I was probably going to call them 25 times before they got there to make sure they came in. But it's that part of staying flexible. So I've learned a lot of personnel skills to that as well. So I sped through that, but thank you. And I just want to say thank you to my colleagues and most importantly, the participants who have very generously shared their experiences.
So I guess this is the time to open up for questions if anyone has questions for Jordana. If not, I can start. Anyone else? Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, totally cool work. We're related to some work that we hope to be doing soon. Were they incentivized to do for each EMA survey?
Yeah.
But they only got paid when they came to the study site.
I'm sorry, I left that out. Yeah. So on those weekly visits, because they were offline, they got paid $1 for every completed survey. So when they would come in for those weekly visits, the Wi-Fi would grab the surveys and then I could count and pay them. So they were incentivized to come in and get the money. Mm-hmm. We were, you know, sometimes people would maybe want to go 2 weeks without coming in. And I tried to accommodate folks as much as I could, but there is also concern about providing too much cash at one visit. And also all the things that could go wrong in those 2 weeks. The phone could get lost or stolen or broken, and then we would never get those data. So yeah, it was very important to make sure every piece was incentivized, provided for.
How many of the phones came back or didn't come back?
So I only, because we were only running a certain number of participants at a time, I had purchased over the course of the study a total of 30 phones for the 122 people. Only about 10% went missing. Yeah, it was. I think that that's probably what would happen in any population. So yeah, they were not the best phones, but they got the job done.
I just have a quick question. With the surveys, they were morning, afternoon, and evening. Did the app like notify them to take a survey, or could they take it at any time they wanted to within like the morning?
Yeah, that was another part I sped through. So when they came in at that enrollment visit, we did a brief training on the phone. And what we did was we developed sort of a practice survey. It didn't have any like real questions. It's what day of the week is it? So it would provide an example of every question type they might come across. And on that training, I was able to help any issues that came up. Can you repeat the other part?
Yeah, just if the survey, like
Oh,
if you had
right.
like a specific time, like morning had to be within a certain time that they notified them, or if their morning was okay, even though their morning be afternoon.
There were lots of notifications. So the whole point of that survey was the practice, and then also there was an initial question, which was, what time do you wake up in the morning? So we set the morning survey to come in when they woke up, the time that they said they woke up. And the afternoon survey was 6 hours after that. And then the evening survey, 12 hours after the morning survey. And we left each of them open until about a half hour before the next one was going to come in, so that people had as much time as possible to complete it, get that dollar or two. And there was not a lot of difference in the number of surveys missed per time point. I think more of the afternoon surveys were missed, but it was nothing statistically significant. But yes, they got alerted when it came in an hour after, and then 2 hours after. And then in this current study, I'm doing that, and then I'm also doing another notification an hour before it closes.
I love this. Thank you. I also was really shocked at the comment, the quote about a friend in my pocket, but then I thought about like self-monitoring behavior tracking is a really powerful intervention strategy. So that makes sense. I was curious about what you said, where when the phones do get on Wi-Fi, then the data needs to be uploaded and then it gets deleted. Was there any way to see if people were using the phone to access Wi-Fi when they weren't in those upload meetings? And if so, there wasn't any issues with like data going away when they weren't at the upload meetings, right?
Well, those are great questions. So actually, I would mention to people if they wanted to connect to Wi-Fi wherever they were located, that would be great. And there was even some circumstances, because it was still COVID time, and some people had trouble traveling, where I would sort of accommodate them and count it as a check-in if they did connect to Wi-Fi, so that when they came in, they could still get the $20 for doing that check-in. So anytime it connects to Wi-Fi, the data are uploaded to MetricWire.
Oh.
So not, it made it sound like the sky, because that's how it works in my head. But it goes into the program whenever they're connected to the internet. So they could just be walking by the building where our office is located. The surveys get scooped up. Oh, cool. So yeah, I mean, otherwise I can't really see. I mean, some phones came back that were very clearly used for things that were not study related, but we had a process for resetting them and wiping them. I didn't read the text or try to get into anybody's business. So that was definitely part of it, but it didn't cause any issues. It was a benefit, if anything.
So when participants don't seem to be engaged in using the building, did you do any coaching or nudging to encourage them to?
That's a good question. I don't, not on purpose. I think when they came in, I think just after the first check-in, when they realized they missed out possibly on, another $21, they work a little bit more. I know there was a handful of participants, although I set these notifications to be really annoying, like the worst annoying sound on the iPhone. They still get missed, but we had a handful of participants that set alarms for themselves on their own phones, so that they would remember to go in and do the survey. So the coaching wasn't necessary. We're excited and really confident.
My question was kind of similar to that, which is we did a similar EMA study where we handed out phones to folks. I noticed that for the folks who already had their own phones, they kind of forgot about the floater phone that we would give them. So I'm wondering if that was an issue for you, if anybody had phones already, taking the surveys like referring to the bar.
That didn't seem to be an issue. I don't know if part of it, like most of the people that were in the study, I had Androids, so that maybe having the iPhone and the Android made it very different. But also that the iPhone couldn't do anything except the EMA, so it really was like a work phone. So I don't know. I think that helps support people using it for when you need it.
Thank you so much, Jordana. That's amazing work. And I will hand it over to my speaker to hear Nneka, who's online, and will be introducing our next speaker.
Hi everyone, my name is Nneka Yume. I am a T32 pre-doctoral candidate at the School of Nursing, UCSF School of Nursing. My research interest is looking at the intersection of HIV, mental illness, and substance use among incarcerated Black and Latinx population. I will be introducing Nneka Emenyonu. The topic is using the prolific research platform for survey on alcohol and tobacco. Dr. Nneka Emenyonu is a project director in the Division of HIV, Infectious Diseases, and Global Medicine at UCSF. She has over 20 years of experience managing complex and domestic and international NIH-funded research programs focused on alcohol use, HIV, TB, and global health. Her expertise includes research program management, implementation of large multi-site studies in low resource and complex settings, and the development of long-standing international academic and research collaborations across the US and sub-Saharan Africa. It's my honor to introduce her.
Do I just decide it? Oh, okay, their microphone's missed, so I just talk. Okay. Thank you so much for that introduction. I must say this is a first to be introduced by somebody with the same name. So I'm feeling right at home right before this presentation. So thank you, Nneka, for that introduction. I'm presenting our work, sharing our work today with my boss, Dr. Judy Hahn, who is the PI of the study that we're going to be focusing on today. And I want to preface this, I want to preface this presentation by saying that we actually had not started using Prolific. And so we probably owe you a second presentation for after we've started and done the study to share more about our experiences. So I'm really going to focus on our planned work and how we plan to use Prolific for the study. And the study that it's always weird when you're in presenter view. I'm like, can they see that? So a little bit of background on the study that we're sharing work on today. It's called the Atlas study. And how did we get to the Atlas study here? Unhealthy alcohol use is under ascertained in clinical care in the US, and patient perspectives on being asked about their alcohol use and also receiving blood tests that measure alcohol use in medical settings are needed. So Judy wrote a grant called Atlas Study, and it is a RAP grant, 1 year timeline, meaning that it has a small budget. We wanted to recruit a large sample size of about 1,020, exactly 1,026 participants. It's a mixed methods study, so we wanted to be able to do online surveys as well as some qualitative interviews. So we're looking for a platform that would really give us all of those options within a limited timeline and a limited budget. Also a little bit of background on how we also, got interested in trying to do this study that had remote recruitment. Judy and I have been doing work in Uganda for almost, or maybe more than 2 decades now, and have transitioned back to the U.S. in the last year and a half, and for I think reasons that I don't need to go into, everybody's aware, but we have had very many studies in Uganda, but they were all clinic-based. We recruited participants and saw them in person for both all of their visits and all of their follow-up visits and their initial recruitment. So transitioning from that model to the US and trying to find a platform and a system that would work and enable us have mixed methods research in the US setting that would include remote recruitment. We needed to, really reach a range of demographic groups and people engaging in alcohol use. Again, I mentioned we needed something that would be rapid and, fit within our timeline and budget. So we chose Prolific, and there was a medical student who did some initial work, sort of like looking at all of the different options and created a nice spreadsheet that gave us all the pros and cons. And Judy chose Prolific mainly because of the fact that it had a really good record of verifying participant human identity, which I think is a major issue with a lot of online remote recruitment fraud. I keep hearing, over and over again how fraud is such a huge issue to contend with. But Prolific seemed to be, one of the best of the options in verifying human identity. They verify your email, phone, photo ID, and PayPal address, which is a system they use for payment. IP addresses, your internet service provider, they do not allow you to use VPN while you are on the Prolific platform, so that they can control sort of location and who's on. And once you've gone through those initial steps of verification, they actually have you do a pilot study where you are given like a screenshot with superheroes and you're asked to write free or type in free text, 1 or 2 sentences, a story about 2 superheroes, so that they can analyze the data that's actually coming from, make sure that the story that you have written makes sense and it's coming from a human being. And they have, a lot of continued account checks throughout the process, some of them also involving researchers. So if you as a researcher question the data that you're getting, you can report back to Prolific so that they can ban participants from future projects. So here's a link to an article on how participants get banned from using the platform. Interestingly, we were just interviewing for a CRC to take on this Atlas study. And she was explaining or sharing with us that she had experience with Prolific as a research participant. And we were laughing because she said, she's going through this verification process and she wasn't sure, am I applying to be a Prolific employee or am I applying to be a research participant? So it's a pretty rigorous process that they go through. And we felt really comfortable with that, that they would do that, most of that work before we start taking a look at the data. Another big reason why we chose Prolific was they handle participant payments, which many of the other platforms are not able to do. So you set up your study, you set up, they have like a transparent cost calculator, so you can, put in how many hours of time your participants are going to, take part in the study, and it gives you, you're able to come up with a payment that is adequate and fits all of their requirements. You put money into a study wallet or fund an account. We haven't actually figured out how that's all going to work. So hoping that CRC will be able to figure that out, and we can share with you how that all worked later on. And then participants complete your study, and then they get paid through the Prolific platform. There is no interface between the researcher and the participants in terms of the payments. So all of that is handled through Prolific, and they use PayPal primarily. I think they can use Venmo in some instances, but PayPal is their primary mode of payment. It maintains, the platform maintains anonymity, so we don't see the Prolific identifiable data, and they don't see our research data. So, we put in a set of criteria that fits within their pre-screening, and they do the checks, they do the ID checks, and we don't get to see the participants' IDs. It's a really nice user interface. It's easy to use. I mean, all of the members of our team have kind of gone in and created accounts and played around, with the system, which is how I was able to put together these slides with, not having used it for a study as of now. And it was rated pretty highly in comparison to Hemberg, which is the Amazon-based platform, and Qualtrics. And the cost, I would say, was also a pretty significant decision-making factor here. They charge for academic pricing 33% of whatever you are paying participants. So it's like an added fee on top of what you pay the participants that covers their fees. And you don't have to subscribe, you just sort of pay as you go. And they do have recommendations. You have a minimum payment. You have to pay your participants at least $8 an hour, or at least $12 an hour. Minimal allowable rate is $8 an hour for. And then they have different pricing for corporate users, but we fall under the academic rule. They have over 300,000 participants worldwide. So this is a platform that's pretty, I don't know exactly which countries, but in the US, there are more than 90,000 users. So, it's a pool of participants who are registered users in the platform that you then have access to pull from. And they have pre-screening data, so you go into the platform and you can select and build in quotas to achieve like a stratified sample. We had considered, these are sort of like our top 3 other contenders. The first one is Eureka Citizen Science, which is within UCSF, BuildClinical, which one of our other colleagues uses, and Respondent. And you can see the common thread here is that they were all too expensive for our RAP grant. So the Atlas study is the study that is going to be our first study that will be launching using a Prolific platform. There are 3 components of the study, and I'll just summarize. We're going to do cognitive interviews with 2 rounds of cognitive interviews with 10 participants, where we'll refine our survey. And then we're going to do a survey. And the cognitive interviews are going to be done over Zoom. So we are also able to interface with the Prolific platform and Zoom. The Zoom capabilities are not embedded within Prolific, but you can send the links to, you can send the Zoom links through the scheduling mechanism and messaging mechanism within Prolific, and then have your interviews on Zoom. Once we're done with the cognitive interviews, we refine the survey, then we do the survey. We're going to try to do 1,000 surveys. We'll start off with 50 and test it out, make sure that we know what we're doing and that it's working as we expect it to work, the platform. And the surveys and consent forms for all of these components of the study happen. The introduction to the study happens in Prolific, but then they get routed to Qualtrics for the consent and for the survey. So we'll do 1,000 total surveys, and then once we're done with that component, we will select a subset of 16 people who are going to go through in-depth interviews, similar to the cognitive interviews on Zoom as well. Here is a really nice workflow created by ChatGPT assistants, but just shows really what the process is for a researcher setting up an account and setting up your study in Prolific. And this is kind of the stage that we're in right now as a group for the Atlas study. So you create an account, you put in your title, you put in a very brief description because that description pops up to participants, and then they make the decision on whether to participate in the study or not based on that. You set your eligibility criteria and your compensation, and all of the study settings that you want communicated to participants. Prolific reviews all of this information, and then we approve your study, and we get your study is now live. You may begin recruiting. We don't quite know what the process is between that you are live and starting the recruitment is. We'll wait for our CRC to help us figure that out. But we start recruiting participants, and one of the things that attracted us to this, that we feel like we can really complete recruitment and surveys and all of the study procedures pretty quickly, rapidly. The participants complete all of the activities, and then we get the data, and we are able to review the data and do some quick quality checks, make sure that it is valid as much as we can tell. And then we approve, we have a process where we approve Prolific's payment, and then the participants get paid. I don't quite know what the turnaround time is because we, again, haven't done this yet, from the time they complete the survey to when we approve it to when they actually get paid. So this is an example of, I was sort of playing around within the platform trying to find eligible participants. So if you can take a look here, at the very top, it says here there are a little over 300,000 participants available globally to who are potential participants. And then I type in, people who drank alcohol in the US. You type in that criteria and you hit find participants, and you see that the number goes down to 37,400 participants who are in the US who drink alcohol. And then you put in further eligibility criteria, and the number keeps narrowing it down to your specific study population. And so here, I'm looking and I'm getting excited that we do have potentially 4,441 matched participants who would be eligible to participate in the study. So when we roll out those surveys, we can very easily get 1,000 participants. But again, we'll let you know. From the participant perspective, this is a little bit of what I talked about earlier. They are already registered users on the platform. They log into their account, and they are able to see potential studies that they might be eligible for. And it will show them a brief summary of the study, what is expected of them, and how much they will get paid for participating. And it'll go through screening and eligibility and consent. They accept to participate, complete the study activities, and then they get, they have the option to submit not the data, but submit, with a code to Prolific that they've completed the study activities. And then on our end as researchers, we get the notification that this has been completed so that we can verify the information, and then payment is made. So this is an example again, because we have not been on the participant end of Prolific. I asked ChatGPT to create some visual of what participants may see in their accounts before they agree to participate in the study. So you can see here the total amount of money that you get paid is right up there at the top. Brief description of the study, eligibility criteria, and possible follow-up activities, etc. And yeah, gives you all of the time commitment, etc. This is then what their accounts or screens would look like if they get routed to Qualtrics to complete the survey. I mean, they start with the consent form, and it's really, in this case, I agree, and they get routed directly to the survey on Qualtrics, and then they are able to complete the survey after that process. Again, this is what it's supposed to look like once they are paid, and hopefully everybody is happy. Some of the limitations, again, these are anticipated limitations or limitations that we have reviewed from reading what other people's experience, other researchers' experiences are. Judy actually was on Reddit reading some of the comments from participants who have used Prolific as a platform as study participants, and and then there's some published data on experiences people have had with it. But the first limitation we have here is that these are professional research participants, so they are primarily motivated by compensation, and this is almost like a job. And so there is also some potential selection bias towards people who are comfortable with participating in research online, who have the resources and have already signed up to be part of the Prolific platform. Participant fatigue or inattentive responses that may influence their responses. Fraud is a big concern, and you can get, depending on your eligibility criteria, you can get very small samples. You can have specialized criteria. Older people, for instance, within a certain ethnic group or race. And there is also bias towards people who have low literacy, or digital literacy, or just don't have internet access. So those are some of the things that we're anticipating would be limitations of using a system like this. So what are some of the things that we're planning to do? We have attention check questions embedded within our survey. So an example of one of them is which one of the following is a vegetable? Egg, salmon, broccoli, cheeseburger, pizza. And we sort of put that in, embed it in there to just make sure people are paying attention and not just clicking C as an option. And if if we somehow detect that there is some fraud or that they are not paying attention, they haven't really completed the survey based on what we find from these events, or even just reviewing the data that just looks off, then they don't get paid for participation. So we're going to have to review our data frequently as it's coming in to be on the lookout for all of that. And we will pilot 50 people for our survey first, work out the kinks before we roll out the full 950 surveys. And then we just got IRB approval. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. And then we're ready to get going in the middle launch. And so we are not, Judy was reminding me, but we're not entirely married to Prolific, even though we are presenting about it. It is our #1 choice. It is what we have planned to use. But if it doesn't work for whatever reason, we will just pivot to alternative options. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nneka Emenyonu, for that wonderful presentation. I will pass it on to Laura Cox, which is my fellow predoctoral student, to introduce the next presenter.
Thanks, Nneka. Hi, my name is Laura. I am a fellow, and I have the distinct pleasure and honor of introducing Dr. Heads, Angela Heads, who is a licensed psychologist with experience in the evidence-based treatment of substance disorders, anxiety, and depression. She also has a specific interest in women's mental health issues. Dr. Head's research interests include substance use and HIV prevention, psychocorrelates of health risk, racial and gender-related disparities in mental health and coping. She is currently working on a Substance Use and Mental Health Services Administration funded project studying substance use and HIV prevention in emerging adulthood. Dr. Head received her PhD in counseling psychology from Texas A&M University and completed a postdoctoral research fellowship in the Center for Neurobehavioral Research on Addiction at UT Health. She joined the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science as a professor in 2015. To continue her research work with the Center for Neurobehavioral Research. She has also been actively involved in training vision and psychology doctoral students in psychology.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about my experience using Qualtrics panels for data collection and HIV prevention research. Why use this type of online panel? My colleague here just kind of talked about some of that. It's helpful for reaching populations that are usually difficult to get in touch with. So I focus on HIV prevention with people who use drugs, for example. There are a lot of stigma barriers to participating in research. So we're talking about sensitive topics here. And so having this online anonymous approach can be helpful with that. And also what I've enjoyed a lot about using this type of research is getting access to really specific geographic areas. We all know that traditional kind of in-person recruitment for this cross-sectional type studies can be really slow, really expensive. And so I found this tool to be helpful with overcoming some of those barriers. All right, so Qualtrics panels is similar to the one we heard about before. A lot of us have used Qualtrics just to deliver our survey research. They have 30 global panel partners, so their reach is really broad. This is information that comes directly from Qualtrics, what I'm presenting right now. So they say they have completed about 64,000 projects. They've served almost 6,000 clients, and they've collected 48 million plus responses via Qualtrics panels. So having access to that global panel is great. They have some quality controls in place, some quality checks, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. They manage it from the beginning to the end. So there's a lot of hand-holding goes through this process. All right, so I've used Qualtrics panel. So this is my first use of it in this particular study here. So I was really interested in the SAMHSA project that I run, the first version of the SAMHSA project that I have run. We were having trouble getting women really involved in the HIV prevention part of the project. So it was focused on treatment of substance use disorders and also HIV prevention. And so I thought it would be good to kind of reach outside of our clinical population to see what some of the barriers are to being involved in HIV prevention. And so having used Qualtrics to deliver the surveys, I looked into Qualtrics panels. And what we were able to accomplish is reaching a really targeted population of 106 ethnic minority women with substance use disorder. And we focused on looking at PrEP stigma, sex risk, HIV testing attitudes, medical mistrust. With the key finding published here in the Archives of Sexual Behavior of medical mistrust being associated with perceived PrEP stereotypes and negative HIV testing attitudes. A few years later, one of my interns wanted to do some secondary data analysis with that same 106 women, and she focused on HIV testing barriers, again, noticing in that SAMHSA population, women being a little bit more reluctant to actually do the testing, even if they were showing up for the HIV, for the substance use component of it. So not a little bit, but some money and a little time, and we were able to get those 2 publications out of it. So it works similarly to what was described with Prolific. You come up with your inclusion criteria. An account person will work with you to make sure that that inclusion criteria is included in the screener. We wanted primarily ethnic minority women. We wanted them to meet one or more of the old CDC defined PrEP indications. And they set up the screener for us and ran the campaign. Some of the advantages of using this includes that the screener was targeted for this specific population, the women with substance use disorder. The anonymous format, we think, encourages disclosure of sensitive information, and we were able to reach that population in a really efficient manner. So we had exactly what we're looking for, all with substance use disorder, all ethnic minority women, and all anonymous participation. So that one went so well, and we got those 2 publications out of it that I decided to try it again. So this is another published study in the Archives of Sexual Behavior 2024. And we wanted to examine factors predicting interest in PrEP among people who use drugs. And I wanted it to be a little bit more broad, so not just focused on women, but still within Harris County. And I really wanted it to match some of the demographic profile of Harris County, Texas, while focusing on that substance use. And so we got the people that we wanted, were able to do the study and get it published. So in that particular case, we ended up with 270 participants with a diverse sample. We got all of that data in less than a month, all of it anonymous, collected anonymously. This is the inclusion criteria that we use. I kind of sped through talking about that, but they completed the screener, did the surveys. And again, the advantages being able to target geographically, having screening questions that eliminate the respondents, the ineligible respondents, and we were able to achieve that large representative sample in a short period of time. All right, so the Qualtrics panel process, and this is information that I got from them about how it goes, and it aligns with what my experience. So in my case, the surveys were already created within Qualtrics platform, and I was looking for a way to distribute it, and so went with Qualtrics panels. But they can also, if you have surveys that you're interested in using, they can put together they can design and build it for you. So the writing of the survey, putting it together was me this time, but they can do it. And after that, they'll go through and set up all the skip logic. They set up the quotas, eligibility screeners, all within the Qualtrics platform. Then the advisors will match the study requirements to their global panels. So they have an idea in their head of for example, how many Black and Hispanic women in Harris County within their panels have a substance use problem. And they can estimate how many people they can actually get for you, make sure that that aligns with what you are interested in achieving for your sample size. And then they field it. There's a dedicated project manager. They go ahead and launch the study. They monitor the completion rates. And then they will replace any poor quality respondents. So in the beginning, you're saying, I need 200 people. If in their initial rollout of it, they end up with 100 people and 20 of them, for some reason, have poor quality responses or they're concerned about them, they'll take them out and then continue the campaign. They do some quality control, which I also appreciate. So for all the concerns mentioned previously, things like people who are, of course, in this panel because they want to make money, why not make more money by taking the survey multiple times? So they have ways of looking at these, what they call digital fingerprints, so they can detect when people are trying to duplicate. They do data scrubs, so they will remove people who complete the survey too quickly. You can go do that wonderful thing that we love and choose neutral for every response. They'll take all of those people out and eliminate them from the study, not from the world. And then that's an extra cost. So, and then they give you a nice, really clean process data set that's delivered. You can also see it as it goes. So if you notice something that looks a little funny and say, hey, we pause this campaign, they'll do that, make adjustments and continue it for you. All right, so some of the strengths have already been mentioned, those quality controls, the partners, the global partners, they have so many people who are on Qualtrics panels already just waiting to do research. You can target specific geographic areas if that's appropriate for your research. The screener questions help filter out ineligible respondents, and then that real-time monitoring. And so this all has the usual limitation of cross-sectional designs that you would expect. The panel respondents might be different from the people that you might see in your clinical setting. So it's all just things to keep in mind. The online format, as has been previously mentioned, will exclude people who don't have internet access. And then generalizability beyond that specific geographic area is limited. Cost, of course, is another concern. I can say just from my personal experience that the cost kind of escalated over the years. That first time I reached out to them was in 2021. And I was like really happy with getting 100 participants for like around $1,500. Not do that anymore. So, and then each time just kind of based on the complexity of the study, how specific you want to be in the participants you're choosing, how large is the sample size, how long the survey, all of that affects the cost. Until this last time where I just wanted like maybe 50 people, and they said $5,000, and I'm like, if I'm gonna spend $5,000, I might as well, you know, like really go find people and maybe use BuildClinical or something. For me, $50 for 50 people at $5,000 was prohibitive for that study. So I passed on them this last time. They have instituted what they call a prepaid pricing structure. I don't have any experience with this prepaid pricing structure, but I thought I would include it for your information. So what they're saying is that they're basing their prices on what they call the incident rate. That is how many of the people within their panels actually match your screening criteria and the length of the survey, because the longer the survey, the more they want to pay the participants. And so for a study like mine, where we're looking at people with substance use disorders and people either at risk for HIV or living with HIV, would probably fall in the C to D, which would be maybe $15 per participant. So that just something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that they also have what they call synthetic audiences. So these are not real people who are taking the surveys. So I did not use synthetic audiences, I use real people, but it's something that's available. These are AI generated responses, which I thought that was pretty wild when they sent me this recently. So probably not appropriate for HIV prevention research, but I just thought I'd mention it because it's out there, it exists. Since they now have this prepaid pricing structure and you can open a wallet kind of like my colleague mentioned for Prolific, it will help you keep track of the costs more easily than in the previous studies I did. So that's an improvement. Also, a challenge with my more recent attempts to use this, so the one where they said we can get you 50 people for $5,000, they're really concerned about including questions in the survey that they consider to be illegal activities, particularly doing substance use research. It's, most of the time we're talking about illegal activities. So they really push back on all of the substance use questions. They said they might be okay if I just asked them alcohol questions. But then when they also said, in addition to that, we're not going to answer the questions you actually want answered, and we're going to charge you $5,000 for 50 people. That was the other thing that made us say no. So, if you want to use them, just be aware of that and make sure your research questions are framed in such a way and have conversations up front before getting involved. Overall, positive experience. I'm happy with the times that I did use it. I got the data I needed, published the papers. The benefits, as I mentioned, asking these questions, these kind of charged questions that a lot of people have trouble with in an anonymous way to people who are already interested in doing research can be a benefit. I liked being able to target to Harris County because that's one of the high burden jurisdictions for HIV. As far as in the future, if I wanted to use this in even more creative ways, I'd like to see ways to do more longitudinal studies and also see if they have ways of doing some qualitative subsampling with panel participants, which had been a challenge in the past when I asked to do that. They didn't want to give us a way to contact the participants after they get the survey. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And so, yeah, that's about it. Key takeaways, provide a good way to target geographically for hard to reach populations. The quality controls are much appreciated. Having someone else be in charge of checking that data instead of me, just to make sure that it's actually real data, that people are not repeating and rushing through it, was a great benefit of that. And now the credit-based subscription could make budgeting a lot easier for researchers. So I think that's also an improvement. And I will stop here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hess. Wow, synthetic participants, that's wild. I'm sure much like you, we all have questions, but for the sake of time, I think we're gonna get presenters done and then we can ask questions then. I have the pleasure of introducing my colleague and peer, Michael, to introduce the next panelist.
Hello everyone, it's my singular honor to introduce the next speaker. Next speaker is Alexandrea Dunham. Alexandrea Dunham is a clinical research coordinator at the Center on Substance Use and Health, where she manages research studies and public health interventions focused on substance use, harm reduction, and HIV prevention. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in anthropology from UC Berkeley. She is currently pursuing MPH at the same university. Her research interests lie at the intersection of housing, substance use, and health equity, with particular focus on mixed methods approaches.
Thank you. I don't know how to make it.
This is
Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Ali. Thank you so much for today and inviting me to join. I'm going to be talking a little bit about BuildClinical, which I know some of our colleagues here have talked about experiences with, and I'm also going to share a comparison between an alcohol use study and a meth use study, just to give you some insight on what those different studies look like. So just to give you a broad overview of what BuildClinical is exactly, it's primarily just a digital recruitment platform. So it helps researchers enroll participants into studies through online outreach and also manage screening workflows. So some of the key features are they help you design all of your marketing materials. They provide digital targeted ads across various social media platforms. They also offer branded landing pages, like a website where your participants can get linked to. They also help with the eligibility survey design. And they offer, of course, real-time lead analytics and then technical staff support. So before we get too far into it, I just wanted to share some examples of their ad creatives, because I know that's something our team has really been drawn to. But on the left side, you'll see one from one of our alcohol use studies, and then the right is from a meth use study that we have going right now. And what's cool is that they provide, I think, 5 to 10 different ad samples when you do work with them. So that'll be a variety of like more vector-based drawings, like the little drawn-out cartoon characters, and then also actual photos of people to try and target like different interests of people. And then the right side, you can see what a landing page might look like. So it's just kind of a simple website, and then it'll have like an I'm interested, and that'll link to the screening form. So just to lay out the workflow a little bit, so how it kind of works when you get started with BuildClinical. So the first step is the researcher will reach out for a consultation, and you'll meet with the BuildClinical team. Similar to the other platforms, you'll define your study population, your inclusion and exclusion criteria. Then the BuildClinical team will create the virtual ad campaign. And again, that's a couple different ad creatives, some videos, some websites, like a big mock-up. They also have a lot of experience working with IRB, so they'll help you submit all of those materials. And then the ads will run on a variety of social media platforms, depending on your population. And then potential participants will be linked to the study landing page. And then there they can take the eligibility screener. And then researchers will get access to the lead dashboard, which I'll show on the next page. And again, BuildClinical will be there to help with like technical support or kind of troubleshoot if you're not getting the target population you want. So this is not from one of my studies, so don't worry, no PHI is being leaked. But this is from their website. This is kind of what the study lead dashboard will look like. So up at the top, you see you can track the new leads, who's been contacted, who's eligible, who's ineligible, who's screened, and who enrolled. And you'll get this list of participants, and these are all the folks who filled out your interest form. So you'll get their names, email addresses, phone number, so you can contact them in a variety of ways. And then the status will usually only show ineligible or eligible. So the eligible folks are the ones who passed the screener. You might need to further screen them to make sure they're eligible for your study. And then you can kind of toggle with that and mark it like you did end up screening them or not. And something we also really like is that it's really easy to keep notes and manage the workflow with various staff. So we will have like 4 or 5 different staff on this dashboard, and you can see each other's notes if someone's been contacted, maybe needs to be recontacted. And then I didn't show a photo of this, but if you click the action feature, that's where you can actually see a breakdown of the survey. So you can see exactly what got someone ineligible, just to like make sure nothing got funky. And then here's a little overview of what the analytics look like. So this is kind of nice because you can see all the campaign leads you've gotten. And importantly, BuildClinical marks a lead as someone who's eligible or ineligible. So it's just anyone who clicked on your campaign. They also have your goal and then how close you are to getting to that goal. They also tell you, which I like, is how many impressions your ads have gotten versus how many clicks. So I think for this study, for example, if it was mine, I would be like, why have we only had 800 clicks out of all of these impressions. And then maybe that's a sign that you need to adjust the campaign. All right, so let's get into a quick case comparison. I do want to note that our center has, I think, worked with BuildClinical on 5 different studies at this point. So that's been like meth use studies, alcohol use studies, a variety of demographics. I'm kind of going to show like the 2 extremes. So one of them is going to be an alcohol use study with a pretty wide population, and the other is a current ongoing meth study with a much more narrow population. So the BEAT study is the first one. It's an observational study. The population is adults who are 18 and over who report sexual intercourse while under the influence of alcohol. Our target N is 100. The location is just the SF-Bay area. The study length is about 1 month to 30 days, and it is an in-person and virtual study. So it's a hybrid study. The other one that we currently have going is Champion, which is an intervention study. That is adults who are 18 and over, specifically men who have sex with men who use meth and are taking daily oral prep. So you can already see that narrow eligibility criteria. The N is also 100, and then it's a multi-site location or study. So we're doing San Francisco Bay Area, San Diego, and LA. The study is 6 months, and it's 100% remote. So you can kind of already get an idea of where I'm going with this. So here's a little bit about the metrics that we currently have. So for BEATS, we received over 900 leads for the course of 8 months. So it was a pretty big group of people. However, out of all 900 people, so that's anyone who clicked on the survey, only 32% were marked as eligible. And then of those who were eligible, we were able to screen 24% of them. So the reason why that number is a little bit lower than like 100% is because we were getting so many leads. I think we ended up with like 600 over the course of that 8 months that were like actually eligible. So of course we didn't contact every single person, but then of the people that we screened and contacted, 67% of those were actually consented and enrolled to the study. So it was a pretty high yield for BEATS. 67% of our participants basically came from that study, or sorry, from BuildClinical. Champion, on the other hand, has definitely been a little bit more tricky. So we had 25 leads over the course of 3 months, and only 16% of those were eligible. That being said, of those who were eligible, 75% were eligible to screen. We're able to screen and move forward, which is great. And then I think 33%, like 1 or 2 of them, have actually consented into the study. So even though we got less leads, it kind of looks like a similar amount were able to get screened, if not more. So some of our key takeaways: BEATS is a long ad campaign. It resulted in a lot more of a steady lead volume. There was also a broader eligibility criteria, so we really think that increased the reach. It's also a shorter study commitment, so I'm sure that influenced how participants wanted to engage with it. The higher lead volume also made recruitment just feel a bit more predictable and easier to manage. We didn't have to jump on every single eligible lead. We had a bit more options, so if you missed out over the weekend, you could kind of just pick up the day you were, because you knew that there were going to be like 5 to 10 leads coming in that day. Versus for Champion, if we see 1 eligible lead, we need to get that. And then these had more leads overall, but it was a smaller proportion that actually advanced to the screening. And then Champion, I do just want to caveat that we're in really early stages of recruitment. So similarly, might need a part 2 to follow up with how it's actually going to go. But at the beginning, I think the restrictive eligibility really limited the eligible participants. So since then, we have expanded it. And since we expanded it, we did see a pretty big uptake in people who seem to be eligible. There's also a wider geographic recruitment range, which I think has its pros and cons. You know, on one case, we can target a lot more people, but on the other, I think sometimes people are a little less willing to participate in a study if it's not like hyper local. But what was really great is we were able to collaborate with BuildClinical, and they really did help us optimize some of the recruitment. So I reached out to them to let them know that we haven't been able to enroll anybody after about 2 months, and they helped us adjust some of the screening questions and reconsider like what language we were using to ask these questions to make sure we weren't accidentally screening out anybody who might be eligible. So kind of the big picture here is that recruitment has improved over time after targeting and screening adjustments were implemented. So I think with a study with a stricter eligibility population, you have to be really like intentional about how you set this up. And now everyone's favorite part, the cost and the budget. So the cost is very tailored to the study and the population. The campaign plan and cost is specialized, so they'll offer a set agreement of a number of leads they will get you a month. And again, that's not like just eligible leads, which I thought recently includes ineligible leads. It's anybody who clicked on your campaign. And pricing, the lowest I've gotten them to go is $1,200 a month, which I think is pretty good. I think someone mentioned like 10,000 was one of the amounts they saw. That is true. Like they do give you an initial amount. It's pretty expensive, but that's like the most optimal setting. Like it's like all of your leads are going to come from here. So if you're down to kind of work with them and adjust it a little bit, they can lower it a lot. And I know for us, we don't just recruit from BuildClinical. We also do a lot of like on the ground like word of mouth reach. So this is just one of the platforms that we use. They also work with researchers really well, as I just mentioned. So they understand that researchers are on budgets. So they might offer like a higher quote, but they're really willing to lower that. And then they have really transparent communication about like what lowering that price will do to your lead volume, how the campaign performance will be affected, and also what deliverables they're actually able to provide you. And yeah, I just will really stress, based on my experience with these two studies, is that costs really will vary by population because they have to pull from like a smaller group of people. So for Champion, the monthly costs were about $700 higher than for Beats. And as you can see, we've already got a little bit less leads. That's largely due to that they have to do recruitment across different platforms. So I think for Beats, they mainly stayed with the Meta platforms. So like Facebook, Instagram, versus for Champion, they had to dive into like some dating apps and some other ones that I'm not exactly sure which ones, but I know that adds a lot to the cost. So yeah, more targeted populations just require more specialized and more expensive recruitment strategies. But I think that's true for anything, regardless of whether or not you're using a platform. And then I want to talk about our staff experience with remote recruitment. So we do have a couple research associates who are the ones who are managing the recruitment workflow. And they could not speak highlier of BuildClinical. They've had a really wonderful experience with them. So as everyone knows, there's a lot of challenges with remote recruitment. It's hard to reach specific populations. I think that traditional outreach methods can result in like limited engagement or inconsistent follow-up, lower lead quality. And since working with BuildClinical, we found that this really like reduces staff burden. The RAs have reported that the process feels just more streamlined, more manageable. Much of the logistical work gets taken care of, so they're able to just focus on engagement and screening and like really caring about each participant instead of chasing kind of like empty leads. We also did try a few other recruitment methods, and we just found overall a lot of them were less effective. Yeah, so we've tried our own interest forms, we've tried other recruitment platforms, we've tried like MyChart and Epic Outreach, and really just spent more time on less participant yield. And we also found that BuildClinical was a lot better for like remote surveys because you were able to, I kind of lost my train of thought with that, why I wrote that one, but yeah, it also worked really well for remote surveys. I think the two that I laid out were like more longitudinal studies, but it's also great for like a short one and done. And then the lead quality has been really huge. So again, we've tried some other recruitment platforms, and like someone else pointed out, bots have been a really big issue. Scam has been a really big issue. I'm not exactly sure what BuildClinical does on their end. They're not as transparent about it, but we have received virtually no bots from them. So it seems like every person that we call is like a very legit person. They also seem really excited to participate. They're really reachable by phone. So that's been a huge, huge plus for us. All right, and that concludes it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll call up.
So much. I'm Anna Whitmore. I'm a second year postdoc PhD student focusing on psychedelics to their implementation for older HIV positive folks. And our next presenter is Dr. Carla Severi, and we apologize for running a little bit late today, so we might have a couple minutes left. But if we have to run right up to, we understand. Dr. Carla Severi is professor in the Division of Prevention Science in the Department of Medicine at UCSF here, and is also the director of the Development Mentoring Core at UCSF Center for AIDS Prevention Studies for CAPS. And Dr. Sperry's research focuses on improving the HIV treatment and prevention of consumers by addressing mental health and substance use challenges, as well as social structure and economic barriers that affect engagement in care. And she leads multiple projects funded by the NIH and TUC that develop and evaluate innovative interventions delivered outside of traditional settings. So next, Dr. Sperry, thanks for speaking.
Hi everyone. I also fair warning, this is like a lot of slides, so I'm going to skip around. But I just wanted to have all of it in here. This basically what I'd like to focus on is really integrating remote research in all steps of a research cascades, from engagement all the way to retention. In 2009, when I started my fellowship, this was kind of what I built part of my career on, is developing remote research. And the reason for that was that I was working with a lot of young adults who didn't want to come to UCSF or Board 86 or a lot of clinics. And so it just so happened that that worked well for a pandemic as well. So my research really wasn't affected at all during the pandemic. And I published this paper right at the beginning of the pandemic, really showing some of the benefits that we've talked about, mainly around stigma, people not having the finances to travel, or childcare, taking time off work, really wanting to target specific health conditions and not being close to that area. Increasing research generalizability. We had a lot of participants talk about how they felt like they could speak a lot more candidly when they were on Zoom versus being in a physical space with someone, and feeling less intimidated. Decreasing recruitment time, as someone mentioned, and then climate change, pandemic, all of that is also benefits of having remote research. Downsides, of course, digital literacy, having access to devices, internet, any sort of vision, hearing abilities. Eligibility verification. So I was working with 18 to 29-year-olds with HIV, and I'll talk about what we did for that. Increasing participation of frauds and bots, and then technology fatigue that we all have. And this is still really important. As you can see, we're all gathered here for that, because this is really an expectation now, both from the participants, funding agencies, as well as a lot of the technology that I'll talk a lot about AI at the end, about the changing environment. So starting with engagement specifically, this was really a testament of the importance of having the community from the beginning to end of a research project. So I had a study called Youth for Cure, and it was talking about or examining what young individuals thought about HIV cure. So that's with the idea of they're going to be the ones deciding in a couple of years when an HIV cure exists, of how they want, what are the deterrents and motivators for participating in receiving an HIV cure. So we had this youth advisory panel. We were trying to explain to them the various modalities, and we got lost in the middle of it. And one participant said, hey, how about we have some comic strips to talk about HIV cure? And it's like those moments in, community advisory panel where it's like light bulbs go off. So we asked him and his graphic designer friends to join us, and we identified the 4 cure modalities that were at the time important. And through this iterative process with this other team called the Animation Lab, we developed some graphic material, and this is all done via Zoom, so we've never met them in person. And we just wanted to make sure there's like no war or like violence or anything that's like, any guns or anything involved. So this is what we started with, which is like so hard to understand. And this is what they gave us, which just these beautiful animation to really explain like latency, reversing agents, immune therapies, and we got to publish the paper with them. So we have this wonderful paper, and these various graphics are now being used in a lot of different research projects talking about cure, not just for youth, but also adults, because so much easier to understand. So I'm gonna skip this one. We're gonna go to recruitment and screening, and you've heard so much from the panelists up here, and this is one of our favorite people to include in our advertisements because he gets a lot of clicks. But for me, BuildClinical or a lot of other tools have really not been very useful because we're focused on a very specific population, and like Scruff, Jacked, and social media has been a lot more useful. These are the things that BuildClinical made that are similar to my colleagues, and really trying to underscore that it's a remote study, making sure people understand that. So talking about bots, I just wanted to talk about a few things that may be helpful if one doesn't have access to funds to use various services. What are some of the things that you can do on your own? And some of the surveys have these built-in safety mechanisms. There's always the trap questions and the open-ended questions that people can add. What I found the most useful is having these very specific eligibility criteria. So really needing to examine someone's age and HIV SIR status before they even get the survey. And then folks have looked at modified compensation structure, so you're entered into a raffle, you don't automatically get an incentive. Also, the post-data collection strategies are looking at IP addresses, geolocation, suspicious research, survey timing, the unusual formats with the Gmail accounts, the straight lining and inconsistent or suspicious responses. So for Youth for Cure, we did that, the recapture, Qualtrics stuff, and then we asked people to either upload their ID and something with their HIV SIR status. So it could be a letter from their physician, viral load, into the screening survey, or that we would follow up with them and then they could share it with us separately. That pretty much got rid of the bots because they couldn't get past that question. Still, we had some fraudulent responses that I'm going to share with you in a second. And then we reviewed all the screeners to also get rid of any suspicious looking email addresses. And then unique surveys were sent to people that they couldn't share with anyone. So we started with 1,308 screener surveys, and of those, we got 271 actual study surveys. That's like a fraction. And these are some of the fraudulent responses. And as you can see, your former president. And this was another one, which actually I didn't even notice the picture. I just noticed it's fluoxetine. I was like, oh, that's not an antiretroviral. And then my CRC, who was, decidedly younger than me, was like, oh, I don't even know who that is. It's someone famous. Anyways, so as you can see, even with
That's how you get the age screener.
I failed. But as you can see, even with all of those bells and whistles, people still got through with, these people are so creative. All right, so moving on to interventions. These are some of the images that I've used in my prior studies. So this was back in 2009 at the top of the pack, explaining the HIV mechanism of action to use, and then exactly where the meds that they were taking were acting, so that they can understand why we need multiple medications, what does viral suppression mean, and with the goal of getting their viral load to undetectable. So this was using telehealth. There was a WISE app that I created that was, again, trying to get folks linked to resources of their own care. This is a tool for clinicians, so a little less colorful, about helping with their patients on PrEP and where they are in their PrEP journey and cascade to figure out what the next best steps are for PrEP use. And then in the middle here, I have this is an AI tool, an app that helps with directly observed therapy. So it cuts down on a lot of clinician and researchers' time to verify that someone took their medication. So one of the studies was called Ivy, and it basically used these video counseling, and some of the folks here are involved in that project or were involved in earlier versions of that. And it was focused on mental health, substance use, and it was supplemented with this app. to really address other barriers to care, such as forgetting, social isolation, and medication management. This is currently in the field. We're almost done with data collection, so we'll have some results about this. This is the app for using an AI-based tool called AI Cure. So the app first identifies your face. It's this 5-step process. It identifies a pill. You put on your tongue, identifies that you put it in your mouth. Once you swallow it, you have to open your mouth and show that your mouth is empty, and then you show the bottom of your tongue. And it's been trained to detect that if you're like, you know, slipping the med on the side or putting in your cheek, it detects that and gives a warning. So for this study, we had it paired with a conditional economic incentive so that every time somebody used the app and took their medication, they would get 75 cents. At the end of the week, if they took their meds 7 days in a row, they would get an additional 25 cents, so $1 a day for 7 days. Total would be $7. So not meaningful, but just small enough for a little dopamine, little stimulation, so that people would get in the habit of taking their medications, and that once we remove the incentive, it wouldn't be large enough to have made a meaningful difference. There's currently, hopefully, an R01 that I'm hoping will be funded for this, and the pilot study was really well liked, and high feasibility and acceptability with its use. So there is currently another study that actually Deep is helping with called WISA. It's an ongoing pilot study of an AI-powered well-being chatbot for youth with HIV, where they use this app for 3 months. And this is more of like just for us to understand, you know, how people like, you know, using AI tools. This isn't the best app in the world, but it's what was at the time the best one that we found on the market. And you know, these technologies move so quickly. So it has this AI coach, which is this little penguin, and then these self-care tools addressing anxiety, stress, relationships. And so we have collected some qualitative and quantitative data. So one person talked about how it's like a resource and it's a way of getting into therapy. So you start with this and then you get into therapy. Another person talked about how, you know, that they understand it's not an actual person on the other side, and that, you know, they can see that it can be beneficial because they can reflect what they want to talk about on them. They actually liked that it wasn't like a real person, that it was more, you know, more tech-based. Another person talked about how, you know, if they felt like it was a stress-free environment and they could just vent without, you know, feeling like they were being judged. That's also, I should just say, it's still being analyzed. And so we'll have data on that soon. All right, monitoring. So in order to really understand how technology impacts someone's day-to-day care as well, we created this mobile technology vulnerability scale with some of my colleagues, and it's kind of analogous to a food insecurity scale. So how does one person feel about their access to mobile technology? And it has these 17 items, which, you know, I have the references here for your information, and really goes from a scale, goes from 0 of having no vulnerability to complete vulnerability. And we looked at this with youth with HIV and essentially found that it was highly associated with adherence and persistence to medication. So the higher someone's vulnerability, the lower their adherence to their medication was. So it, you know, something definitely that it's impacting, and a way of understanding how, you know, maybe medications or access to healthcare is through a technology lens. And then lots of ways of monitoring and assessing. So I'm going to talk about the text message, pill counts and refills. I've done hair levels that people do at home. So they cut their hair at home, mail it into the study, and we do drug levels on those. There's dry blood spots for a lot of tests, swabbing that could be done at home. We talked about the directly observed therapy. We had this study that I was a co-investigator on. So this urine test is kind of like a dipstick for examining adherence to either PrEP or tenofovir-based regimens for antiretrovirals. And this is typically done in the clinic now. So we actually, in this study, sent it to the participant because it's super easy to do. It's kind of like a pregnancy test. And they text messaged us the dipstick. And then lots of other things, breathalyzers that are Bluetooth enabled, wristbands, biosensors, and all sorts of other products that are available. So for the home collection of lab tests, we did this study as part of the my prep project, which basically occurred during the pandemic where people weren't going into the clinic. So we sent them a kit to do all of their prep labs, including pregnancy tests, hepatitis C, all the swabs, and a SARS-CoV-2 nasal swab. And we had super high retention on it. 74% experienced excellent or very good overall experience. 84% said that they would recommend it to a friend. And when we collected the time that it took them to do everything, it was around 30 minutes, which, you know, in comparison to the person driving to the lab, waiting, you know, getting the lab done, driving back home is, you know, huge savings on their time. And when we asked them how they wanted to do this in the future, the number one response was home. And again, this is during the pandemic, so a little giant grain of salt. But even when we talked about, you know, people are wearing masks and face shields in the clinic, so there's no risk to you, they still wanted to do it at home. Another study where we looked at adherence, and this is from a frustration not being able to collect objective adherence data at home. We asked people to either take a picture of the refill date on their medication bottle and text it to the study, or empty out the pill content of their medication vial, take a picture of it, send it into the study, or clip their own hair, attach it to the foil, and send it into the lab. And we looked at these three different measures of adherence. So refill records, pill counts that were done this way, or hair levels. And we found very high levels of correlation between the levels, and specifically the pill counts and the refill records were very highly correlated, and high levels of acceptance. Again, this is the study that we did for the home collection of labs, and this is all on our website, prep.ucsf.edu. So this is the box that people use, and we created these video and written instructions in Spanish and English with my dear husband, who was the model in the video to do the swabs. The current study I have, we're doing the same thing, but not the Watman card anymore, which takes a while to dry. So this is the hemospots where people, you know, put a drop of blood in the middle, and it kind of absorbs into the unit, and they could be closed and mailed directly to the lab. And then there's also Tasso, which is another way of doing dry blood spots, which is a little less invasive, and it can collect more blood that can include drug levels. We're doing this for cabotegravir and rilpivirine. It could also be done for viral loads for the future as well. All right, finally, retention. And we talked a lot about this. This is a paper that my research coordinator and I published a few years ago, really talking about some of the pros and cons of different methods of incentivizing, and really the digital wallets like Cash App and Venmo were the number one and what people really, really wanted. And so through these years, I've developed really detailed protocols and have multiple studies at UCSF and made a huge case and think about why we need it. So hopefully that will become a UCSF mechanism for paying participants. And just really quickly, some of the lessons learned, you know, these are the things that I see in grant applications. If we're doing human-centered design, humans really need to be involved in all steps, not just the, you know, tiny step at the beginning. This is again for people writing grants, early career investigators, for acceptability, usability, all these measures. We need benchmarks in the grant application. Like we need, you know, is it over 80%? Is it over 70%? Tailoring and adaptation, having these home-based collection, offering options for incentives, improving access, having videos and considerations for cost of development and maintenance, which I didn't talk about, but if you're gonna have an app, just know it's a nightmare. Like, it takes so much time to update and maintain it over time. So maybe, really have that discussion of whether you can maintain it over time. So some of the future directions, AI-assisted engagements, which I have a whole slide about that we're going to get to, the ethical implications and equity concerns for digital health are big things. So this is all the ways that I'm looking forward to using AI. So for recruitment and outreach, there's a lot of ways of tailoring messages, data quality. AI can actually help detect some of the bots, which, maybe it helped create, but it's also helping detect the duplicate responses. Also screening enrollment, it can help explain some parts to the participant of the consent. I don't think we're ready for prime time for behavioral interventions, but that I definitely think is something that will be used more and more in the future. Passive monitoring and sensing. So this is through all the speech patterns, all the trends from your smart devices, helping with adaptive research, the personalizing intervention, survey times, helping with retention of study engagement, with reminders, identifying disengagement risk before it happens and encouraging adherence. And then there's going to be a ton of work on ethical concerns, privacy concerns, surveillance, bias, equity, trust, transparency, and then the over automation, which hopefully that doesn't happen, but it really shouldn't replace the human connection. So what I just hope you don't get from this is that I'm not saying remote research is a must and it's all about technology. It really isn't. And I really hope that the takeaway is that the research just needs to be built around people's lives and meeting people where they're at, and it's not a one size fits all. Just a huge thanks to everyone. Milo and Carol, thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, I will stop right there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saberi. Unfortunately, we are at time, so I know a lot of
Yes.
but would it be okay with the panelists if you have any questions to email you? I'll pass it off to Deepa to close up.
So I wanted to just thank all of our experts for being here and all the audience in the Zoom and all for being here. And if you have any questions about T32 program or the SUPR, just feel free to reach us or Yvette, Milo, anybody. So thank you all so much.
Who are you talking to?